Good morning. Wow, driving to work in the dark. This is October. I love it. It's actually not as dark as my phone camera would suggest, but I am indeed driving to work. This is that time of year. So pretty soon my work schedule will switch to 4:10s and then 4:9s and then back into, I guess, 5/8s, depending on what work we have to do at the irrigation district and what kind of light we have to work with. I suppose there's some other inclement weather things to consider as well, but that's what's going on. So I am headed to work. I am trying to get my game face on for being all that I can be at my day job. And guys, I am of course focused on driving here, so I won't be able to give much eye contact to the camera. I'll give no eye contact to the camera as should be. So this is more of a practice for me to just get used to letting my thoughts be known earlier in the day, not waiting till my lunch break. So my thoughts on personal finance. And if you don't know me, this is the Seth Rhodes Show, where we talk about personal finance, mindset, and a little bit about things I'm also into, but those are the main two. So I think they blend beautifully. Your mindset affects your financial future and your financial education, which really is what I'm about. Financial education. Not because I'm financially educated, but because I'm not. Because I'm trying to become so. So I'm sharing my discoveries with my audience and growing in real time in front of people, because I started, like so many people, with not a lot of knowledge in this arena, and here, approaching my midlife, I have some thoughts on it, and I have a little bit of time to do things very differently, and I think I'll reap a huge results. Now, I am fast forwarding in my mind to when I'm an 80-year-old man, and I have investments and savings and cash flow from those investments. Not a lot of savings, mostly just cash flow from investments, but the point is, I'll be in a very different place financially if, Lord willing, I'm still alive at 80, because the choices I'm making here in midlife. So if you are not excited about being old and rich, you'd like to be young and rich, I'm with you. But better to be old and wealthy and have something to pass on to someone, your kids or someone you choose to pass it on to, than to not have that option, right? So I'm getting started young when we think of a full life. I'm getting started late when we think about being young and wealthy. I'm not going to be young and wealthy because I'm not young anymore. I've come to grips with that. It's not as sexy, it's not as clickbaity, it's not as exciting to be old and wealthy, but I'd rather be old and wealthy than the alternative. And so getting started with what I can do with the time I'm allowed is a huge thing for me. So seize the day. That's what we're going to call this one, seize the day. So let's do some experimental thinking about where we want to be in a year. I think maybe year 60 is a better year to analyze, because it's hard to imagine year 80. At least it is for me. But my parents aren't that far away from year 80. So when I think about them, I'm like, well, actually, this pertains to the whole thing. You know, I don't want to get off on a huge side tangent here, but really this is just me riffing. So if you were 75 and just getting into investing, one could say, well, that's definitely too late. But you know what? People who are 75, well, they have some limitations that are different than when they were 50 or 35. They still need income, they still need money, and they still have a little bit of money, because at the very least, our social security system pushes on hourly in the face of almost being over. Like, it's been predicted to be out of money for a long time, and there's political reasons and perhaps some other really wonderful reasons that keep that system going. But yeah, it's safe to say it's not over yet, so people continue to use it. Wow. So back to focus on where I'm at, because that's what I can share the very best, the most poignantly. I look at it like I have 40 years to invest. And that is not about me enjoying my wealth, though I'm certainly going to touch on that, and I certainly believe in that. I certainly believe a person should enjoy their wealth. I believe you should live frugally, share, but also, if you have wealth, you should enjoy it, and that's great. So I'm not about sacrifice for no reason. Instead, I'm sacrificing for a reason, and my biggest reason is to learn, and to learn about something that I think is extremely valuable. And the lessons I will learn around investing and building wealth are going to be character building, because I am committed to fighting both greed and poverty. I think that's fair, and I think money doesn't solve that problem, but because I'm also working on that problem, money has a good place to land when it comes towards me. So money will be put to work. Money will be used wisely. I'll reduce waste, and I'll grow my money, I'll grow my wealth, and I'll grow my connection to people through the process, because it is a journey, man. So, man, I already forgot the theme of this one, but that's bound to happen. So maybe it'll come back to me. So let's talk about consumerism a little bit, because that is, wow, that's a big one. So our economy, U.S. economy, may not be your economy, but it is my economy. So what it does to affect me and affect the world, it does through, among other things, consumerism. So something like 70% of our economy is based on consumerism. Now, I'm gonna have to go, I realize now I need some hard numbers on that, but let's go with the knowledge that consumerism drives a lot of our retail stores and a lot of our businesses. So when people spend, and when people spend on credit, parts of our economy boom, and because it's a big part of our economy, you could say overall our economy booms, and it's based on our ability to spend and keep spending, and sometimes spend money that we don't have, spend future money. That's what credit is, right? Future money. So when a person dials back and decides, hey, I don't want to live spending every last cent of every dollar, you know, I have experience with this, there's no shame here, but when a person makes that switch in their mind and starts practicing that, starts saving, you are hurting a sector of the economy. And if a lot of people did that at once, we would have a crash. But you know what? While I can't control the macro, I can somewhat control my own choices in my own little micro world. And I'm choosing not to spend every dollar. I'm choosing something much closer to a 75, 15, 10. Now, I give full credit to the Minority Report. Did I quote that right? Minority Mindset, not the Minority Report, not Tom Cruise. So, the Minority Mindset by Jaspreet Singh. That's his YouTube channel handle. So, look him up. He's awesome. I listen to him more than anybody at the moment, among many, but he's my foremost guy. I'm just really going through his material. He talks about how he breaks down every dollar he spends. So the 75, 15, 10 looks like this. He will never spend, I'm gonna change the wording to I will never spend more than 75 cents of any dollar I make. And so that's the max I would spend. 15% is the minimum I would invest, and 10% is the minimum I would save. Now, we could go over this two ways. We could address the ratios in relation to each other, which I think that's a good place to start, and then we can address the ratios in light of other things. So first, on the spending part, when you're first starting out, I would like to be radical and say I wouldn't spend more than 50% of every dollar. However, I've lived a long time spending not just 100 cents of every dollar, but probably about 106 cents of every dollar. And if you understand how credit cards work, or like me, halfway understand how credit cards work, then you know that it's possible to live on, $1.06 of every dollar you've made. So I don't recommend that. That's why I'm having a midlife turnaround. So that's a beautiful thing. Beautiful turnaround. So, so 75 cents of every dollar is actually fairly radical when you have not been living that way. So that's a big deal. And if you could only spend 75 cents of every dollar, we'll talk about the mechanism, the how, in just a second. But for now, we're gonna talk about these kind of ethereal numbers. 75 cents, that's a good place to start. Still gives you most of your money to spend. So if you were making a dollar a day, you'd be able to spend up to 75 cents of that dollar. If you were making 100,000 a year, you could spend 75,000. You say, well, that's pretty good. In fact, that is the median income, 71,000. Some sources say 75,000. I've heard other sources say here in 2023. So if 75,000 is the median income, a lot of people are living on that. They're not living well, mind you, but they're living on that. And if you were going to only spend 75 cents of every dollar, you could do this as long as you made $100,000. You could spend what most people are making in total. But that's off in the weeds. We don't have to explore that yet. So I think we understand the 75 cents on the dollar, or you could say 75% of your income, being the max you could spend. Let's focus on the 15% to invest. So this is a minimum. The 15% or 15 cents on the dollar that you choose to invest is actually very minimal. But once again, if you haven't been living this way, it's radical. So Jaspreet would only ever invest a minimum of 15 cents. So I think he's moved well beyond that, but this is his set of starter rules, the guidelines to get someone like me going. And that honestly is a huge, huge thing, because statistically only half of the population invests at all, at all. We'll talk about why that's so critical. And of that half, only a small minority of that does anything besides their own company 401k matching program. Once again, we do this without shame, so I'm not going to say, oh my gosh, that's terrible, because for many years I haven't even done that. I've done that some, and I've gone into that on some other episodes, but even that I haven't done. So it's a big deal to just at least go with the company match, but that deserves its own spiel as well. So, and then moving on to the 10% or 10 cents of every dollar, this is the minimum you would save. Now, you might wonder why you would invest more than you save, and I think one of the best arguments is the inflationary environment that we face in the US economy not going away even when the government, or in this case the Federal Reserve Bank, uses onerous means of please talk English, Seth. I like big words, but even when those who decide the value of our dollar in a roundabout way, the Federal Reserve Bank, even when they make it really hard, and they're making it hard for the purpose of bringing inflation down, even so, inflation is still here and probably will be here for quite a while. And the nature of our economy actually depends on a small amount of inflation. They say the target is 2%, and that's the way it's been. But looking to wrap up here quickly, we'll have to dive into each of these topics in depth, but it's it's such that saving versus investing, if you want to keep up with inflation, saving is clearly not the way to do that, because if I save $1 today, in about 10 years, it's worth nowhere near $1. That's even with 2% inflation. So a lot of people don't notice that. Jaspreet argues, and I think argues well, that the government picks 2% because they think you won't notice. You know, I'm not getting into conspiracies here, but for all intents and purposes, that's how it works out, because Jaspreet points out, if you ask the man on the street what is inflation, up until a year ago, no one could even tell you. That's how uninformed the average person was about inflation, me included. I knew it existed, but I didn't know what that meant. It means your dollar, your paper money, becomes less valuable over time, and it happens rapidly at 2%. So you can imagine what happens when it's at 9%, and it got up to about that in recent history in the last couple of years. So, fact check me on exactly when that was and if it was exactly 9%, but it got up high, and in certain areas like housing, it's much more of a price hike than even inflation. So there are areas, food, energy as well, all those things were much above the 3% we're experiencing now, the 3% inflation mark. So keep that in mind, that if you save money, it's going down in value, and inflation is eating that value away. So saving, there's a couple different ways it doesn't work. You could never save enough on most salaries to make a big difference anyhow, and the dollars you save today are not the same amount in dollars that you will have in the future, especially if you're saving over the long run. So there are reasons to save, but if you just take Jaspreet's word for it, 10% is probably as much as you want to save, because there are other things that are actually more important. Your income is actually more important than your ability to save, with the caveat that you have to live on less you earn, but you'll say your savings can't be too huge, and there's only a few categories to save on, and I'll look that up again and talk about that later, because that is critical. But investing actually deserves a bigger portion of your money, and that is how those relate to each other. So we call it the 75-15-10 rule, and we'll touch on all of that and more later. Thanks, guys.